On the day of the fete, the servants were up at dawn, bringing down long tables and laying them with fine damask, porcelain, and silver. An ice sculpture in the shape of a harlequin was placed in the centre, and cut-glass chandeliers were hung from a series of ropes. Boats shaped like swans and peacocks, their painted wooden feathers splayed out, were brought down to the lake on carts, and sackfuls of pink rose petals were floated gently on the metallic surface of the water. Before the party started, Sido was taken down to the temple, where a concealed door in the wall was opened to reveal a cubbyhole, with a good-sized window to look out of, and a spy-hole to see into the temple itself. Gazing out of the window, Sido was reminded of the toy theatre she had had as a small child. The scene before her had the same magical quality. The orchestra struck up, and the guests began to arrive. They came as punchinellos, scarpinos, scaramouches, harlequins, pantaloons, pierrots, columbines. Tumblers and jugglers from the Paris circus performed amongst them, while a tightrope walker in a harlequin costume crossed back and forth above their heads. At last, the Marquis made his entrance to the sound of trumpets, his winged chariot pulled by 4 men. The Marquis was helped out, an apparition in gold silk brocade. He wore a breastplate with the face of the sun on it. His wig was gold, studded with gems. His mask was made of thin gold leaf, and looked as if it had been blown across his face. The effect was dazzling, so much so that the sun might well have decided not to shine out of envy. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the colour of iron. The highlight of the entertainment was an Italian singer who was enjoying a great success at the Paris Opera House. Her voice soared through the gathering clouds, calling to Zeus himself, who answered in his deep bass voice with a mighty rumble of thunder as lightning forked its way towards the lake, followed by a sudden downpour of torrential rain. The guests hastily abandoned their tables, spilling wine and knocking over chairs as they ran for cover, tall wigs flopping in the rain. The scene, so wonderful, so magical at the beginning of the day, lay in ruins. To Sido's surprise, she heard her father's voice, together with the ladies. He and Madame Perrien were taking shelter in the temple. Sido decided that it was best to stay where she was. "I have no money to repay the Count," said Madame Perrien. "He wrote me a letter on black paper with white ink. You know what that means." "There has been a little misunderstanding," said the Marquis. "It signifies nothing." "It is no misunderstanding," said Madame Perrien. "I implore you to lend me the money. You're my last hope. If you do not, I'm as good as dead." She reached out to take his hand, but the Marquis quickly pulled it away, disgusted. "Madame, this is no way for a lady of your rank to behave," he said curtly. She laughed a hard laugh. "I tell you this, Monsieur le Marquis. Not inviting the Count was a grave mistake. I think you will come to regret it, bitterly." "I have no idea what you're talking about, Madame. Let us go back to the chateau for a glass of champagne." Madame Perrien was not listening. "The Count could destroy all of us if he wanted to." "Madame," said the Marquis stiffly, "this has gone far enough." He tried to step away, but Madame Perrien grabbed hold of his gold costume and collapsed to her knees. The look of revulsion on the Marquis's face would have been comical if it were not for the seriousness of what Madame Perrien was saying. "At the beginning, I thought, like you, that it was just a silly game. I had to give him something precious in return for the loan. He said he wanted no trinkets, just a few little secrets. I gave him letters which I now fear incriminate me. When I asked for them back, he laughed and said he had them under lock and key and would use them to his own advantage, if I did not repay him." Madame Perrien now had the Marquis's full attention. She let go of his coat and pulled herself up. "What secrets did you give the Count, I wonder, in return for his generosity?" I dread to think what he will want in return. The Marquis pursed his lips. This does not apply to me. He did it purely out of friendship. Madame Perrier made a mirthless sound. What folly! He once told me what his private motto was. Show no mercy, have no mercy. The Marquis, who had swum all his life in the shallow waters of polite society, avoiding at all costs any meaningful conversation, suddenly realized that the largest pike in the river was after him. He straightened his back and looked at Madame Perrier coldly. I cannot speak for you, Madame, though I would say that your dealings with the Count have been unwise. Now, if you'd excuse me, I must join my other guests. Cedar watched her father turn his back on Madame Perrier to walk down the steps, where 2 footmen were waiting with umbrellas to escort him towards the chateau. We made a pact with the devil, she called after him, and the devil is coming to get us. The Marquis did not turn round. Madame Perrier called louder this time, not caring who heard her. Count Kaliowski has bought our souls!